Story 1. One that still makes me laugh is about my dad's former coworker, who had a cat named Frank. Imagine a grumpy-looking gray cat. That is exactly what Frank looked like. My old neighbors had a rabbit named Hop-Tart. Story 2. A rabbit named Jamarcus. I saw it in a tweet, and I still chuckle when I think about it. Story 3. I rescued an abandoned Jack Dempsey cichlid left in a bucket on the street. He was a mean motherfucker, so I named him Sid Fisshouse. Story 4. Fork is a cat that was found under a dumpster with a fast food fork in its mouth. Story 5. I was in the vet's office when a man came in and said Uncle Bear was there for his dental cleaning. He had a giant wolfhound. The dog was super cool and laid back, and somehow the name fit him perfectly. Story 6. My sister's friend named her pet snake Lieutenant Dan because he doesn't have any legs. Story 7. My forever favorite is my friend's bearded dragon, Elizabeth. Story 8. My ex had an orange cat named Starburst. The name is not that funny, but the entire friend group would call him by other candy names, which annoyed my ex to no end. What really upset her was that Starburst figured it out and would respond to anyone using names that were not his. Story 9. I have a coworker whose mother has 6 chihuahuas, all named after chips. Frito, Cheeto, Dorito, and I forgot the others. Story 10. My son had a hamster, Arnold Schwarzenhamster, and a chihuahua, Conan the Barbarian. Story 11. A German scientist lived next door to me and named his dachshund Bismarck. Story 12. I always thought the name of Data's cat in Star Trek The Next Generation was funny. Spot was an orange striped tabby. Story 13. My child named our cat Nice Grinch after the Grinch who stole Christmas because at the end of the story he becomes kind. Story 14. When I was about 10 years old, I was at a bus stop for school when a friendly stray cat pounced on my feet. It was so sudden that I got scared and ran all the way home, and he chased me for my shoelaces. His name was Sneakers from then on. I loved that silly boy. It was probably the lamest story, but I thought Sneakers was a funny and unusual name for a cat. Story 15. Chicken, Marsala, Piccata, Cacciatore, Parmesan, and McNugget. Story 16. When I was a kid, 50 years ago, there was a big St. Bernard down the street named Bob. Story 17. I saw a French bulldog on the beach pushing rocks across the sand. His name was Dung Beetle. Story 18. Arson was a perfect name for that chaotic gremlin of a cat. Story 19. I long for the days when I can get a horse and name it Mayo. Story 20. In the newspaper I subscribed to, they featured a pet of the week in the weekend edition. It was a cute profile of a pet available for adoption. One day there was a cat named Lidl Lee. Story 21. My brother Bill named his dog Ted. They had excellent adventures together. Story 22. Nyuspi. My friend's kids couldn't say Snoopy properly, and the name stuck. Story 23. I think I read somewhere that a tortoise or turtle was named Voldemort. Story 24. My friend from middle school through high school had 2 cats. Trash Can and Dammit. Joe, if you are on here, hey boo. Story 25. Someone on Reddit posted a photo of their cat named Metropolis Boomington, which I thought was pretty funny. Story 26. When we were little, my grandparents had a dog named Dipshit, but all the kids knew him as Dipper. Story 27. A cat named Costco. Beef chili with beans. A horse named Susan from accounting. Story 28. My pets' names are Eugene, Walter, Jolene, and Francis. Their names suit them, and I can't imagine them having any other names. Story 29. I adore my best buddy's dog. His name is Chuck Norris. They call him Chucky, but I always use his full name. Story 30. Beryl, originally named Barilato, for a very chunky American Staffordshire Terrier. It made me giggle for a good minute. Story 31. I knew a French bulldog who had a birth defect that left his spine about half its normal length. His name was Ed. Story 32. A professor for a dachshund. In German, Herr Professor, which means Mr. Professor, does not translate well into English. But I laughed out loud when the man shouted Herr Professor, and suddenly a tiny dachshund came around the corner. Story 33. A dog named. In Australia, we use to mean hey. At the park, someone said, "I, come here." Story 34. Hissy Elliott is the feral cat that loves free food but hates people, also known as damn cat. Story 35. Off the top of my head, I remember a ferret named Dammit that is my Pepsi. They called him Dammit for short. Apparently the littermates like to steal things from the coffee table, and the name stuck. Story 36. My dad had a mule named Bartholomew. I have a shepherd mix named Cedric Doggery. Story 37. A colleague allowed her 6-year-old son to name their new cat. He chose the name 007. Story 38. A relative had a cat many years ago named Fidel Castro. She sent a letter with a picture to the man in Cuba. She did not receive a reply. Story 39. My pet chicken is named Carol Baskin. My goose is named Otto, short for automobile because he honks. My Texan jumping spider is named Howdy. Another chicken is named Emergency Dinner. Naming pets goofy names is my hobby. I have many chickens, dogs, a hedgehog, and other animals. Story 40. When I was a kid, my English lop rabbit was named Guinevere. She was narcoleptic, which we were not told before we took her in, so discovering that was terrifying as a child. Story 41. My friend's last name is Mann. They named their dog Rocket. Story 42. Firulais is a popular name in Mexico for stray or mixed breed dogs and is used affectionately, like calling any random dog buddy or pal. The name has ties to United States-Mexico border slang. The origin story says immigration officers at the United States-Mexico border used to ask migrants if their dogs were free of lice, but that phrase was misunderstood as Firulais and the name stuck. Story 43. A cat in our system is named Pussy Poppin'. A neighborhood cat named Wi-Fi has the home's wireless network password on its tag, so you can get the password if the cat likes you enough. Story 44. A cat named Whiskey loves to give kitty kisses and twine herself around people's ankles. She makes you stumble and she is quite the licker. Story 45. I had a cat named Freddie Mercury because he was positive for feline immunodeficiency virus, and I thought it was fitting. Story 46. My best friend got a dog. It is worth mentioning that he is not the huggy and feely type. He named his dog Fungus. When I asked him why he named him Fungus, he said, "Because he grew on me." Story 47. I met a 4-year-old girl who had a fish named Fishalicious. Story 48. Our rescue cat was named Dinkleberry Uberwang, or just Dink for short. My son's current hamster is called Nigel. Story 49. My dad named his dog D, short for dog. Took me way too long to figure that out. Story 50. Bella, short for Baby Bell Cheese. Casio is a piebald orange tabby, and Pepe is a black and white piebald. Story 51. When I was younger, I had a dog named Catfish. I now have a dog named Boogie Smalls. Story 52. From Ted Lasso, Higgins's cat, Cindy Clawford. Oh, I saw a video of a kid who named a pet moth, Mott Hugh. Story 53. A cat named Skunt, short for Smelly Rascal because its rear smelled all the time. Story 54. Doug the Pug. Madame Chofler, also known as Chuffy, was my giant bunny. Story 55. I had a German Shepherd named Buddy. Later I got a second dog, a female, and on a friend's suggestion I named her Holly. Story 56. My dog in Stardew Wumbus. I love the Stardew name generator. I also find it hilarious when cats and dogs have names like Sharon, Bruce, and Gary, human names that usually do not belong to animals. Story 57. There was a cat named Dave. I have no idea why it is so fucking funny, but I chuckle to this day. Story 58. My friend named his pit bull Puppy Buff. He genuinely had no idea what it meant or that it was a word at all. When I told him, he said he did not care and that he loved the name. Story 59. A cat named Booger had a small black spot on his nostril. Story 60. Because I laugh at my own jokes, my cat's names always get me. Leonardo DiCaprio and Cat Winslet. Story 61. My partner and I have a dog named Huckleberry. We adopted her right after a trip to Yellowstone, so huckleberries were on our minds. For years her family has bought us any huckleberry-themed or flavored item they find. Jam, wine, soda, candy, hats, t-shirts, and more. I joke that it has worked so well with huckleberries that we should name our next dog Drugs. Story 62. A friend of mine has a bull terrier called Frankenweenie. Story 63. A female cat named Kevin Sparkles, known as Kevin for short. Story 64. A beagle named Missy, short for mischief. A python named Severus Snake. Story 65. The first cat I ever named was Mouse. When I was very small, I kept insisting he was a mouse. In my defense, he was extremely young and a gray cat. Story 66. A friend's mother was an emergency room nurse and rescued a little kitten at the hospital where she worked. It was outside on the ambulance ramp, just meowing like crazy. She named it Ramp. Story 67. My kids named one of their guinea pigs Jimothy. Every veterinarian we have seen has laughed and commented on the name. Story 68. I don't know if that was real, but I once saw someone say you can name a cat anything and the cat can do nothing about it. With a dog, you may need to call it by name in public, but cats have no such limitation. You can give a cat a regular human name, which leads to a fun game. Talk about your cat to people who don't know you have one, and see how long it takes them to realize you are not talking about a partner or roommate. Or you can give a cat an off-the-wall name, like a random object. The height of name comedy is having two cats, one of each. These are my cats, Switchboard and Gary. Story 69. I have a dog named Chili, called Chili Dog, and a cat named Kit, called Kit Kat. I giggle every day about it. Story 70. My friend named his puppy dog. I had two black kittens that I rescued from a dumpster behind a bar and named them Rum and Coke. Story 71. A cat named I Am. In the evening, the owner stood on the porch and called, "Here I am." Story 72. The sweetest little old lady lived on my street when I was a kid. She had a Doberman named Satan. Story 73. My mom's legal name for her cat, which is technically also mine but I don't live with her anymore, is Steve Bandicoot Snookums Rajit III. Story 74. My grandfather had a dog named Dammit. The dog's original name was something else. I cannot remember it. The dog would not come when called, so my grandfather would say, "Come here, Dammit," and it would come. He changed the dog's name to Dammit, and it was on his dog tag. Story 75. The cat shelter I volunteer at gets the weirdest cat names. Here are some of my favorites. 20 What? Emergency Exit. Kitchen. Laundry Room. Stegosaurus. Triceratops. Round Mound of Rebound. These are just the ones off the top of my head. I am sure there are many more. Story 76. When my grandmother was a child, she had a black dog with a racial slur for a name. I am not kidding. Story 77. I keep pet tarantulas. I currently have Tarantula Jolie and Mariah Harry. I once had one called Quentin Tarantulino. Story 78. I like when animals are named after other animals. I used to ride a pony named Bear and knew a horse named Rooster. Story 79. A few funny shelter names for cats are Tokyo Drift, Janine from Human Resources, Suzanne from Purchasing, Tilt-A-Whirl, Conventional Oven, Small Astronaut, and Keanu Reeves. Story 80. This rabbit is named Ted Bundy because he is mean and will bite you. Story 81. I've always been fond of people naming their pets after different animals. This is my cat Turtle. My dog's name is Shrimp. It is so dumb. I love it. Story 82. I had a pet chicken named Dinner when I was 10. I raised her from an egg. She was a cool little buddy and used to ride on my shoulder. Story 83. Extra cat. We already had one, but another decided to move in. Story 84. I named my cat Kelvin. While I do not think the name is particularly funny, I have been told it is a strange name for a cat. My nicknames for him include Mr. McKelvey, Kelly Welly Doodle, and Kelly McDoodle. Story 85. There is a therapy pig with a wheeled prosthetic. They named him Chris P. Bacon, and I am going to hell for laughing far too long. Story 86. My dog's name is Caboose, but we've met a scruffy little dog named Scrambled Eggs and two cat siblings named Tax Evasion and Wire Fraud. Story 87. I had a pit bull named Yumama. I got a lot of funny looks when I walked her through the city. Story 88. I had a coworker who could never take extra shifts or volunteer with the rest of us on trash cleanup days because he always had something to do with his uncle. It took years for us to realize his uncle was his cat named Uncle. Literally the best pet name ever and the best way to get out of doing things. Story 89. Nutmeg for a cat. The name itself was cute but unintentional. I went to my grandma's one time while she was not home, and I texted her to ask the name of a stray she had adopted. She responded, Kitty Nutmeg. So for years I called the cat that. One day she asked why I always called it that. It turned out it was a typo. She had meant Kitty No Name. She had never planned to name the cat and would simply call it Kitty. Story 90. Out of context, it's not funny, but my neighbor has a cat named Jennifer who gets up to a lot of mischief, such as jumping onto the kitchen counter. At least once a week I hear my neighbor shout, Jennifer, get off the counter. Story 91. I have a cat named Zucchini. The rescue named him that. His sister was called Radish, and I thought it was too ridiculous to change. I knew someone with a pug named Ming the Merciless. Story 92. I worked at an emergency veterinary clinic. A sweet, older English woman brought in her daughter's cat named Fudd. In Scottish slang, Fudd means vagina. So filling out the paperwork for Fudd the cat in Scotland was a test of professionalism. The woman had no idea what the name meant. Story 93. Ozzy Pawsborn, the Prince of Barkness, was wearing round sunglasses. Story 94. We could not think of a name for our cat, so we temporarily called him Tuesday because that is the day we got him. My friend named his three cats Susan, Tracy, and Lisa. He did this so he could stand at the front door, shout the women's names, and demand they come home. It was funnier when he used a prop mobile phone. Story 95. Bungee Cord is a small, lanky tuxedo kitten with legs for days. He quite literally bounced off the walls every time we saw him playing in the room. I understand the name. I was laughing out loud. Story 96. My pigs were named Pork and Chop. My kittens were Miss and Fit. A friend had a dog named Dog. Story 97. I'm a lab tech. Last week I had Lucifer and Elvis Presley. Not related. I've also seen Frankfurter, Baguette, Toyota Corolla, and Spud among others. Story 98. There was a chunky Chihuahua for adoption and his name was Thicken Nugget. Story 99. I've kept pet rats for the best part of 15 years and some of mine have been Meryl Squeak, Edwina Scurry, Amy Winemouse, Ratsy Kensit, Chutica Queen of the Iceni, Rada Thunberg, Cleopatra, Bet Pidler, Tail Porter, Misdemeanor, General Discomfort, Major Paranoia, Bob Rodenkirk. Story 100. Mrs. Parsley and the Colonel were two pigs who were vegetable patch terrorists. Story 101. I have had a few cats. My grandfather gave each of us a cat called number 1, number 2, and number 3 based on our birth order. When I was older, I had a cat called Uma Perman. Story 102. I once had two female kittens named Leroy and Jenkins. Story 103. I am a big fan of over-the-top names like Dr. Whisper Wolfington III, who belongs to my in-laws and whose actual name is Wolfie, short for Whisper Wolf, even though he is a tiny toy poodle, and Professor Frank Snuggleton, who is also called Frankie or Snuggles. Story 104. I had a cat named King Philip IV. He was named after Philip IV of France, who disbanded the Knights Templar. Story 105. My coworker found a friendly, abandoned cat at a roadside rest area. On the way home, no one could agree on a name, so they called him Rest Area. He was perfectly content for many years. Story 106. I saw a new anchor laughing loudly while doing a story about a farm that named its pig Crispy Bacon. Story 107. The cat that visits my veterinarian frequently is named Email, and its dog sibling is named Fax. Story 108. Two dogs. One named Dog and the other named Miles, nicknamed Tails. His tail spun instead of wagging from side to side. I also know someone with a cat named Phyllis. Story 109. I worked in a pet grooming shop in high school. There was a dog named Sticky and the family's name was Syrup. Story 110. At one point we had family staying with us because their father was either being deployed or had just returned from deployment. My cousin had a cat that kept coming upstairs and getting into things. So my father told my cousin, "If I catch that cat upstairs one more time, I'm taking it to the Chinese restaurant to get almond chicken." Ever wonder why there are no stray cats around Chinese restaurants? From that moment on, the cat's name became Dinner. It was the only word the cat recognized. A few months later, the cat got upstairs and into some things again. By coincidence, my father had ordered Chinese food for dinner. My cousin came home, saw us eating, and panicked, asking where her cat was. My father replied without hesitation, "I do not know. Did it get upstairs again?" She later found the cat hiding under her bed. Story 111. My brother-in-law has a cat with cerebellar hypoplasia. The cat's name is Flop, and his full name is Michael J. Flop. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.